Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. Today's guest is recognized in the pharmaceutical and clinical research industry, bringing 20 years of experience to the table. His core strengths lie in clinical operations, essential data monitoring, clinical trial management, and clinical systems. We will be discussing how to choose the right clinical research associate for your clinical project. We will be exploring 3 points: the evolving role and skill set of CRAs, training and specialization, and finally, site selection and CRA-site relationships. Let's extend our warmest welcome to Innovaderm's Vice President of Clinical Operations, Cal Given.
Thank you very much, Valerie. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and talk about the evolving roles and responsibilities of our clinical research associate role.
Great. So let's get started here with the skills CRAs need to have in order to keep up with the changing study designs.
Yeah, so as we look across the pharmaceutical industry, I think everyone recognizes that the designs of our clinical research continue to evolve, become more and more complex, both because of the addition of new technologies and different ways of capturing data. But, recently a lot of studies are starting to incorporate decentralized type of concepts where, either patients are being visited at their home or they may be going to an auxiliary clinic to have some portion of the protocol completed. And so it's becoming more and more complex. And all of that burden really is placed at our clinical research sites, which are our partner. So when we think about the CRA in this model, one of the things I was thinking about is how important it is for them to understand the logistics of every clinical study. It's a unique skill set, right? Not one that you would typically associate, but if you think about the patient journey, they have to go through all these different procedures, go to the doctor's offices, take home devices, take their medicine. There's so much that they have to do within that process. And so in order for a CRA to really help a site execute and be compliant within the expectations of the protocol, they really need to understand how to navigate all of these various components of the study. I think, the analogy I would use is going on a vacation. If you've ever gone on a vacation with a friend who planned everything out for you, you felt like you can go from place to place. You knew you were going to get there on time. You weren't going to miss a show or a dinner reservation, versus the friend who didn't plan so well, kind of goes with the flow, but also probably you're constantly changing, what your expectations are. And in a regulated environment, of course, we really need everything to be done as expected, as defined in the protocol. So I think that's really one of the areas. The second, I think, is really, the fact that we have all these new different technologies and ways of capturing data, and we're capturing more and more data, right? It's just not data that's captured in a clinic, but we send patients home with mobile devices, which is capturing data all the time. And as we start to think about different types of data and how monitors need to look at that data, they really need to understand different data models. It's not simply a vital sign is captured in a source record and then transferred into another system. They're looking at larger types of data, different types of data. So they need to understand, I think, some statistical elements. They don't need to be data scientists, but they need to understand what are the types of signals that data scientists or central monitors are looking at, so that they can understand what does that mean as far as an implication for the site, and how they would then go about helping that site address something that may not be going according to plan.
And in your opinion, what would be the top qualities for CRAs to have?
Number one is critical thinking. Many years ago when I started in the industry, the role of a CRA was very rote in its process, right? It's very, did the site do this, X, Y, Z? But we now are doing so many different types of data review. And again, as you introduced myself, my focus has been really on centralized data monitoring. How do we look at data in real time with different types of analytics, different types of trending and pattern recognition? And so as all that's happening now before a CRA even goes to the site, They need to be able to understand all of that information and then apply it to the setting of that specific site. And that requires critical thinking. They need to understand the nature of the data. They need to understand how the data is collected, where there may be a possible a failure in that system, and then be able to apply a series of mitigation or remediation steps to fix a problem as it arises. So that kind of critical thinking is really essential. It's just not acceptable to go out and do just a simple review of the data. It really is about helping sites perform better.
Absolutely. So let's move on here to training. Could you share the impact of specialized training for CRAs?
Yes, I think training is essential for all the roles in our industry. But one of the things I'm really proud of at Innovaderm is the investment that the company is making in training of our CRAs, not just our CRAs, but all of our essential roles that are engaging in the clinical research process. So our medical monitoring team has invested a lot of time in developing a 16-part training around dermatology, all the various indications, the etiologies, the manifestations, the current treatments are out there. And that provides our CRAs with a wealth of knowledge that they can go out to the site and actually act as a trusted advisor. So part of my experience in the industry, I've done a lot of consulting. And one of the things that you really want to be able to do when you're working with a site is to give them the confidence that you are giving them the right information so that they can then modify their behavior in a way to align with the expectations. And so, this term monitor has always been thrown around, but I have always seen it as kind of a negative connotation because it's like we're trying to penalize the site every time they do something wrong. And how we really want to engage sites is by giving them the right information and the right knowledge so that they feel like we're helping them improve in the conduct of the study. And so, that trusted advisor type of model is what I see as essential. And it only comes through training and awareness. And so, again, the fact that we have that opportunity to do that here at Innovaderm is really exciting.
So what would you say problem solving and root cause analysis play in this process?
Well, we've talked about a few things, through the discussion, but again, thinking about the skills they need, they need to be multidimensional in how they look at any situation at a site. They need to understand the data. They need to be able to think critically. And that's all part of getting them to a place where they can really assess what is happening at a site. I worked with a couple of really brilliant biostatisticians in the past who always sort of gave me the motto, which is that most sites do things correctly most of the time, but it's when they don't do something right, they continually do to repeat that. And there's something under that. When we think about a root cause, you need to really understand what is happening. We can't always just apply, well, let's retrain the site. If there's a technology issue or if there's an underlying procedural issue at the site, we need to be able to understand that so that we can actually apply the right mitigation strategy to address any of those risks that might be coming into our visualization of the data or operating model. So to me, it's really bringing the whole process to the full cycle of we know there's risks, we observed the risk, we identified what the root cause of the risk is, and then we can actually fix the risk.
Exactly. So moving on to site selection, how does the CRA's knowledge of the site performance play in the site selection process?
Yeah, it's critical and essential, of course. So I think there's two ways that we try to leverage their knowledge. The first is collecting the right data in each study so that we can actually have a quantifiable way of assessing performance for historical work. We get a chance to work with a lot of the same investigators in this therapeutic space. And so we know a lot of them and we work with them on multiple studies, although in many cases, obviously, we're working with new sites as well. But as we work with those sites, what's essential is that we capture the right type of data on how they perform in the historical studies, because then when we go to work with our site selection team on future studies, we know which sites have performed well and in which ways. So that can be everything from, how many protocol deviations did they generate in the past? Or if you look at their endpoint data, how consistent is the endpoint data and the individuals that are administering that at the site. So those are all great determinants of how the site might be performing in the future. And we capture and continually look at that data. But things change. And so data only tells you part of the story. The other part of the story comes from the subjective nature of working with a site. Are they responsive? Are they able to take direction? Are they willing to accept their faults and to work to improve those? And so those subjective things, I think, really come through more of an anecdotal type of feedback mechanism. So when we do this, one of the things as we go into each studies, our site selection team does work with clinical operations, presents a site list, and we have an opportunity to provide some of that constructive feedback. Now, we don't like to eliminate sites because of that, but it's an awareness of where that site may need help in the future, so that those types of that knowledge can be then utilized to start the site off on the right foot if they've been having difficulty in a specific area in the past. And so that we do on an ongoing basis. And then, of course, we requalify sites for every study just to make sure nothing substantial has changed, whether that's their facilities or they've had a lot of staff turnover. We need to always look at those things because, historical performance does not always predict future performance. And so, it's a constant, ongoing, cyclical process, I think, that we have to enable.
And on to our final question here. What would be the essential tools for CRAs?
So there's really two groups. I mean, at the end of the day, a clinical trial management system is still the most essential tool, as well as a trial master file. Obviously, one tracks all of the various actions and activities that we're engaged with at a site level. So how much data we've reviewed, how many action items we're tracking for them to address, protocol deviations, all that type of operational data. And then, of course, all the documentation of that sits in our TMF as the evidence of what we've done in any clinical trial. I wish those things were better enabled because they are often very manual in nature and require a lot of energy from the CRAs. Maybe as artificial intelligence comes forward, and we'll see how that can help, our CRAs in documenting and keeping more of this data consistent and being able to capture it in more effective ways. But we've recently gone through a process of selecting, a new CTMS and ETMF. And we're really excited because we've spent a lot of time trying to build in some of those efficiencies to make the process more of a feedback mechanism, just not putting data into the systems, but being able to get the data out of it so that they can also manage the next set of activities. And that's where the other thing that we're using a lot of these days is Power BI as a data visualization tool. It pulls data from various systems and presents it in a way that a CRA can see how much work is at each of their sites, what are the types of risks that they may have, and it gives them the sort of a one snapshot view of that world, and that really helps them then planning for the next site. So that's where they get the feedback from the data they capture in the CTMS. They get it back to be able to use for their next visit, and again, it just keeps going until we get to the end of the study.
Definitely. So this concludes our conversation today. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It was great to talk to you. Thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to engaging more of our customers in these important ways.
As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.